Hi everyone, and a massive welcome to another insightful episode here on InfoSec Live of Selling Cyber. Apologies for the intro videos. Tried to play the first one, got jammed up in the system somehow. So we've had a little bit of a medley bringing you into some 80s retro gaming there. But Selling Cyber, where Greg Vandergast and I explore how vendors can impress additional value from their offerings in a way that can drive real change to the security landscape. I'm your host, Simon Lindstead, and sharing stories and best practice has led to over 10,000 hours of our content being watched on YouTube by you, our amazing 5,500 subscribers. So a huge thank you for your engagement. And thanks to your support, it's also led to the launch of our in-person community-driven events in the UK and the US with a focus on knowledge sharing, networking, and definitely no sales pitches. And today, Greg and I are going to be focusing on how events work and sometimes how they don't work as well. So quite a relevant topic. But check out our events page for more info. Link is in the description with our next event here in the UK on Thursday, sponsored by Apex or IQ in Manchester. Then June the 20th and 21st in London to coincide with InfoSecurity Europe with Next DLP and CISO Terrier before heading back over the pond to Stafford, Virginia to the Cyberbytes Foundation's Quantico Cyber Hub on July the 13th. However, August, we have lots of events being planned in the US. So far, we've got Tampa, Las Vegas, Austin, Texas, and New York City. We are still accepting sponsorship inquiries for our US tour. Drop me a message if you'd like more info. Meanwhile, back in the community, Precious, who I see in the chat, our community director here at InfoSec Live, has been organizing group study sessions, CV workshops, networking, job alerts, and a new 8-week workshop to help those looking to break into the industry. And we've had nearly 500 applications for that. So looking forward to going through them tomorrow with Precious and the team to choose our lucky 30 winners. If you haven't checked out the community, again, link is in the description. Make sure you do. And if you'd like to offer sponsorship or assistance to the community, please do reach out to myself or Precious. Let's help us break down some of the barriers to entry in the industry that we're seeing. But if you don't have the time and you still like to support the wider InfoSec Live community, our scholarship fund, or indeed just buy me a cheeky decaf coffee, we do have a few ways you can show your appreciation. First up, the ability to purchase super stickers in the YouTube chat if you'd like your question bumped up to the top, and 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you can. And while we're on that, a massive welcome to our latest member, Estella Reyes. Thank you so much, Estella, for your support, not just with the membership, but for your constant contributions on the shows as well. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. So if you're watching live, make sure you subscribe. We want to make these interactive, so make sure you also drop any questions in the chat. Time for Simon to stop running on and bring Greg on. Why are you so small?
I don't know.
There you go.
It's all gone sideways today.
So we're having Technical Monday, I'm going to call it. How are you?
Not a technical glitch, but I quite like how you burst out laughing when you uttered the word insightful.
Yeah. That's what they call a Freudian slip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I crack up as I pretend to.
No, I was just thinking about the cluster that was the intro videos. Nothing to do with the insights to be gleaned from today's show from Greg and myself, I'm sure. But Greg, a massive welcome. Haven't spoken to you for about 3 days. How was the weekend?
It's good. It was warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unusually warm.
I am quite red, as you can tell. It's supposed to be quite warm for the next couple of weeks. I was out in the sun having a pint earlier. It's been a good day.
Nice. Makes a change here in the UK, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's been a very late summer.
Yes,
Like,
very late.
Last year, like what? early April was really nice.
Yeah, and I think if we look back to lockdown, I know we're going off tangent, but it was beautiful, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh. Probably the wrong words to use there.
I gave a talk at the Ministry of Defense on Tuesday. It was really, really interesting because it was kind of security, but more with a focus on leadership. So I got to talk about a lot of stuff that I'm quite passionate about. But there were a few technical glitches there where the screen kept freezing. So just talk amongst yourselves. And
you're used to it coming on here, aren't you?
Yeah, it was interesting because it was my first time that I gave a talk, and they actually had the sign language interpreter.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I was giving my usual spiel about my sister bringing home the movie Hackers, and me figuring if I break into computers, I get to shag Angelina Jolie. And I'm just like looking over at the sign language lady. Like, I'm gonna learn some new words here. I think she was like mortified and laughing at the same time.
Oh, brilliant! I wish I'd have been there to see that. So where was it at? The Ministry of Defence, did you say?
Yeah, at Abbey Wood, where they do all the kind of procurement for all the armaments.
Interesting.
That was really cool. Really, really cool. I hope to do something thrown together. Bit of time pressure, especially because with a few technical glitches. But yeah, really, really, really great topic. Really enthusiastic about it. Hope to do more of it. But yeah, quite a lot of fun. And you know what? Today I've spoken to a multi-billion-pound vendor, a multi-billion-pound reseller, and a multi-billionaire.
Wow, good day.
Yeah.
Or potentially good day. We were saying actually, weren't we, before we came online? I've also had a call today with I can't mention who it is yet, but a fairly big player in the reseller space who's interested in sponsoring a load of our events moving forward. So good day all around.
My favorite was the multi-billionaire, just parked up in Alderley Edge in my Morgan behind this massive Rolls Royce. And he just came up to compliment me, and he's like, "Oh, I also have an old car." And he just rolls, "Here's my old DB4. Here's my DB6." And then there's some pictures of like what looks like an interior, but it's far too large. He's like, "Oh, sorry, that's my jet."
Yeah. I love how that just slipped in there.
Yeah, 6 or 7 of like Bentleys and rollers. I'm like, "What do you do?" And he's like, "My grandma died, left us several billion."
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, so what do you do now?" Get drunk mostly. Well, it's like, what a life.
Sounds terrible, doesn't it?
Yeah, brutal.
I bet he'd still rather have his grandma. Why have you got? No.
I got nothing.
I thought I'd lost you then.
Sorry,
okay,
grandma.
So today then, let's just have a look at the chat. Who we got? We've got loads of people in there as usual. Thanks ever so much, everyone, for popping in. We're going to talk about events today, I think, aren't we?
Yes, and I think you just jogged my memory. I think today the audience can be particularly helpful because I think there's a lot of psychology behind what we're going to talk about today. The reason I thought of this topic was I speak at a lot of events, and because I'm getting more and more kind of sales, I always try to, whatever it is I'm working with, I'm trying to like pick it apart and understand it and figure it out. And I can remember like in the earlier days of speaking, I had this kind of routine, and the intro with the taking the piss out of myself, the hacker days, you get a bunch of laughs. But then once you start talking about the security industry, why it's not working, more concepts, leadership, team building programs, that kind of stuff, the serious stuff, and the audience is quiet. And initially it would make me really nervous because I had no idea, like, are they engaged or have they bored? Do they want to hear more about the FBI duct taping things to sensitive areas?
Always, Greg.
Yeah. But it wasn't until like observing a bit more and observing other people speaking that I noticed like people are fidgeting. People are moving their bodies a certain way. People are tapping their toes. People are, and I noticed like, they're facing me, they're leaning forward, they're not moving. That means they're paying attention. So I learned to recognize the body language a bit more. And I think the audience here, I suspect the vast majority of our audience today has been sold to, has been in an event, listening to people talk, listening to salespeople talk. And one thing I saw at a recent event is I was talking, just kind of the opening thing. And very often, like I don't get much of a briefing, so I kind of keep it generic, and I try to be funny and open it up and try to give some insights, but at a very high level. And then the vendors will come in, and I'll have spoken to some of these vendors, and I know that individually, really, really experienced, really qualified, good people too. Their job is to sell. And then they will then start talking, they'll do their presentations like, this is the problem, these are the numbers, this is the scary part, where our solution comes in, here is how it works, only we do blah, 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 blah. And I see the audience, like I see the body language change. I see people kind of sitting back in their chair as opposed to leaning forward. I see they're like moving away a little bit. You can see that they realize they're being sold to. They're starting to like filter, or like they're not just being sponges anymore. They're really like questioning and trying to figure out the bias here and the slant, and how much of it is true and how much of this is sales peak. There's a lot of like active resistance to what's being sent their way.
Do you think that's because the industry's so full of acronym and over promises that can't be delivered on, that people just lose interest as soon as they start to hear that?
I think the acronyms is a good point that I hadn't thought of. I don't think it's the acronyms per se, but every time that you have to pause, even if it's like a quarter second to figure out what an acronym means, that's a quarter second you're not listening.
Yeah.
And everyone in the audience has experienced that. And just to finish, but then the exact same people that people were just listening to, mistrusting a bit, they will then sit on a panel where they're talking as much to the audience as themselves, but it's not scripted. They're just answering a question from the audience. They're giving anecdotes of their experiences, and that's where their expertise shines through, their experience shines through, their know-how shines through, but also just the fact that, hey, we encountered this problem, we worked on it. Like, you can see that they're good people. Like they're people that you want to associate with. And I find it very interesting to see audiences react very differently to the same presenters, based on whether it's a panel discussion or it's talking at the audience.
Yeah, agreed. Let me bring up a few comments in here, because there's some really relevant ones. And Fergal, in fact, has pretty much just wrapped our show up in like one comment. People like, people like stories, not pictures, which is exactly the point I think really that we're talking about. And Infusion Power, who I think is actually called Joe, Joe W. Infusion of Power, sorry, Joe. People like to buy, not be sold to. And I think they're two really, really good points, and keep the points coming in the chat, please, people. And Carlos, my friend, good to see you as always. My guess is the foundation of creating a space of trust was not established early on. And again, it's back to that building a relationship first, isn't it? And that's why perhaps my comment on how an event can be more successful is, well, two immediate comments. One, don't have your sales pitch right at the start of the event. Give people an hour and a half, 2 hours to mingle, meet each other, know who the people are that they're listening to, and start to establish some of that kind of trusted relationship. Yeah. And secondly, the presenters need to learn how to read a fucking room, right? Because if what you're saying is true and their pitches are falling flat on their face, it's no good just reading off that script and carrying on with that presentation. They need to reinfuse some of the personal stuff back again, because I mean, you said it at the start, right? It's and Prashant said, did someone say duct tape? Yeah, Greg always talks about duct tape. You know, when the duct tape's being used in those interesting stories, people buy off people is the biggest point, I think. Now I'll be quiet for a bit and try and read these comments as they're flashing.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember now, because we're like 3 or 4 points deep. But again, down to relationship, and previously we've talked about relationship building, but we're talking about awareness campaigns, educating customers, stuff that happens over weeks and months. Now we're talking even just a vibe among people who are just meeting in a room that are going to be together for 2-3 hours. It matters, and I've always had this approach of educate, provide value, by which I mean provide some insights. Like tell them about the space. But I think a lot of vendors prey on this
fear narrative.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that the people that they're selling to may not be fully aware of everything they need to know. They're at the event to be informed, and then they're telling them a bunch of like kind of scare stories as opposed to like objective facts, instead of like educating them as to this is the reality. it's not all bad. There's this, there's that. Here's how you should approach it. It's just scary stories. They're really kind of taking advantage of the lack of know-how in some cases. Whereas I believe, like, if you educate, people will understand, people will appreciate that you gave them those insights. And like someone said, like, people want to buy. So once they know what they need, because you've educated them,
where are they going to go?
Then they're going to, exactly, and they're going to trust you. And I think also by educating them, you now have basically also educated them to stand up to all the people selling them FUD. If you educate a customer and build a relationship at the same time, all the people trying the more sleazy sales tactics will get dismissed. So I think that's quite powerful.
No, I completely agree. Guess who's in the house?
Who's in the house? Ah, there he is.
Hey, David. Nice of you to tune in this week. Good point, though. People want to buy from people.
No one buys from me.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, might be. People want to buy from people they like. If you're not injecting personality or experience into the pitch, then it's hard to build that relationship. And this goes back to your original comment. Thanks, David. That it's great to do the build-up bit where you're building that rapport, but you can't then lose that bit throughout the whole presentation. So it's finding a way of injecting that in as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think some of the metrics are really interesting. We talk about, I think, metrics in sales are a peculiar beast. I think we've discussed. You'll have marketing departments that are rated or compensated based on the number of views or impressions, but that doesn't mean they're good. It doesn't mean they convert.
No.
And it's that very tricky relationship between marketing and sales, because sales will complain that, well, you gave us a whole bunch of leads, but they're terrible. We couldn't even convert 1%. And then marketing say, well, our leads are great. It's the salespeople that are crap. They couldn't even convert 1%. And it's not until you try a different avenue. And so, for example, I'll do some events or something, and we've had really good conversion rates from time to time. And the salespeople are clearly interested in doing more of that. But then the marketing people is like, yeah, but you only generated 100 leads off of that. It's like, yeah, but we converted 10. That's like 10 times the usual ratio that we get. But marketing doesn't want to repeat it because marketing actually missed their target for that quarter because they didn't have that many leads.
Yeah.
But sales had more sales. So sometimes the metrics that we use are really poor. Because I've got several organizations where like multiple salespeople want me to come back and do more stuff with them, but the marketing department doesn't want.
No. It's
a marketing department that pays speakers like me. So that's an interesting one. And also when doing talks, I get a lot of pressure of, talk more about our product, because the actual metric is the number of minutes of product exposure in front of the audience, which I think is really dumb, because if you're if you're just pushing it down people's throats, you are literally planning, getting approved, funding, organizing an event, getting the venue, getting the food, getting the drinks, the catering, getting the people in, all the name tags, the swag. And then you are potentially going to take 50 people who are kind of like sort of interested and make them hate you.
Yeah.
Because you've just drowned them with exposure. I think it's much, give them insights, explain how things fit, what the problem space is, and how your solution could help.
Yeah, and also it's I mean, there's a few comments I want to draw on in the chat quickly, but it's about working out what problems the people you've got there have actually got before you start telling them what your problem fixes, because it might be completely irrelevant to them.
Yeah.
And Paul Robinson's made a good point. The shift happens when vendors realize you can't sell cybersecurity like a dentist can't sell his or her services. You can identify the problem, convey the risk of it, and leave it to the person to know. Back to your point about educating people. And while Greg and I chat about this, I want to get the audience involved more. And I noticed there's a few people in there who are in sales or have been in sales. I'm going to pick on a couple of names here. Michael Huskin says, I like my former days in sales, just didn't like the corporate culture. This is back to your point, Greg, where a sales rep is worthless if they haven't sold anything in a few days or a week. And again, it's back to the business understanding how that sales process actually works. But the question I've got for everyone is, drop what industries you were in sales before and the roles you were doing, because I want to make a point about, there's a kind of myth about how to sell. I don't know what fell down then. There's a myth about, selling in cybersecurity, but my argument is it's absolutely no different to how you sell any other product. So I want to cover that off, because, well, it isn't, because people, as people have said on there, people buy off people, and without those relationships, it doesn't work. You've got to tell me why you're chuckling now.
Isn't it just so typical of security to think we're special?
Yes.
In security, it's different.
It is. No, it's not. It's
really
not. It's really not different. And I think, you very kindly made some comments. Steve Armstrong came on last week, who's also got extensive experience in industry relevant sales as well. And
can I just say, I'm sorry that I didn't attend live, but I did watch the recording the next day, and I was like, I've spoken to Steve several times.
Yeah,
I was honestly like just goosebumping at his level of expertise and experience, and also just, I don't know what to call it, just goodness about.
Well, if you were an SDR or whatever the acronyms are and the fancy titles that are given in the industry, you'd want Steve as your manager, because going back to the comment in the chat, I think it was you, Michael, who said, if you're not hitting your targets or bringing stuff in for a week, the pressure you get. That was not what Steve's about. He sees the value in building those relationships. I'll just have a look to see. So brief stint with Apple, education and telecoms, before cyber telecoms. Oh, telecoms is a favorite. Worked for a major US telecom provider, education provider. What else have we got?
It's because telecom companies keep buying cyber companies.
Maybe that could be something.
Running them into the ground.
And Fergal said, sales SDR, firstly SaaS, backup and recovery, now bug bounty. I'd argue selling cybersecurity is different, as you leverage the cost of inaction rather than positive changes like growing revenue. Very true. However, let me counter that. I worked in financial services for over 20 years, and a big part of that was selling protection. How do you sell protection? Through fear. Unfortunately, it's the same thing. So I'll give you an idea of, this is back when, 2000, I had a laptop and a printer all in one big case that I used to carry around to see clients. And we used to see corporate clients and individual clients. But let's use, individual clients as an example. On that very high-tech Toshiba laptop that they gave us, there was a slide deck. And this slide deck was there to encourage people to think about certain scenarios that haven't happened but could happen. And you'd launch into it, picture of a family, husband, wife, 2 children. You'd have the husband and the wife sitting there. Kids would be climbing on your head and poking pencils in your ear or something similar. And you'd say, okay, at the moment then, this is you. Everything's going fine. What if Bob, let's say his name's Bob, got hit by a bus yesterday? Press the button on the slideshow. Bob disappears from the picture. You've now got wife and 2 children. What bills stop? Does the mortgage still need to be paid? Does food still need to be, And then, they then start thinking, wife looks at Bob with absolute death, wondering why Bob hasn't sorted this out already. So you have to be careful. A bit like the finance director and the CTO relationship, I should think. The next picture goes off. The wife disappears. It's just the kids. Well, now you're past protection and you're into trusts and wills and estate planning and all sorts of good stuff. But it's still, you're not selling anything tangible there. You're not selling, a new shiny iPhone that you can play with. It's similar. So whilst I agree, Fergal, there are definitely differences. The fundamentals of how to sell to people and how to engage with people. Going back to those old appointments again, my old sales manager, the thing, if you'd have watched the one with Steve, I mentioned that on there as well. What we got taught to do was, as soon as you walk in the house, or if you're on a Zoom meeting now, you start looking around to see what there is. So if they've got a football trophy on the mantelpiece, note that down in the notebook. You can see that the wife's like doing cooking in the kitchen. She obviously does it a lot. So you can mention love for cooking. And then you can start to build rapport with these people by picking up, tell me about the football. Get people to talk about what they love. Get people to talk about them, because everyone loves, believe it or not, the sound of their own voice, especially me. And I'll stop talking.
I want to answer William Welch before, because I said telecoms are running cyber companies into the ground. Because it just seems, I've seen at least half a dozen times every major telco buys at some point a cyber unicorn for a couple billion and then sells them for like 1/10 what they paid 3 or 4 years later because they couldn't make it work. I've seen that scenario so many times. I'm also going to slightly disagree with the whole selling fear. Well, Paul makes a good point there. There's no instant ROI. The only ROI in cyber, only ROI in cyber is future discussion, or an even attack can go red quick.
Yeah,
I disagree with that. I think if you look at security from as the standpoint of a quality function, where we're trying to fix business process, so the business process doesn't keep producing systems, applications, code, processes that are vulnerable to all kinds of things, you tend to actually generate a lot of savings. So for example, the last time I did a review of Salesforce, because like, why do we have 58 admins in Salesforce? We found that we could actually optimize Salesforce. So we only needed one admin and one break glass account. And we saved 48,000 quid a year in license fees. So we actually saved a lot of money. We saved 40 grand on marketing because we tried to review the marketing department's business process so that it was done securely. And we found all these examples of waste. We found by reviewing why are we getting all these vulnerabilities, we found all these really poor coding practices that were costing us a fortune in rework. We found that we were overspending on AWS by at least 150 grand a month because of how developers were doing this. So there's a lot of savings that security can drive if you make it really business focused. And I've also had scenarios where, like on my team at Scoutbee, I had a security commercial officer, and his job was, for example, he studied all the industries that our customers were in, and we actually studied and created I think it was like a 7 to 9 page white paper for each one of like all the risks that they had in their industry, how we structured our security team, operations, everything. We did the security stack, all the business processes to counter all those threats, and basically to show that we cared. We really took the time to look into all these details, and these are all the things we did. And we would get tender requests from companies asking absolutely nothing about security, only just functional requests, right? This is a supply chain management, like manufacturing supply chain. They're not security people. Their procurement people aren't security people. So absolutely no questions. And then we came back to in the reply to the tender, we included several slides about security, how all these things we do, because we have customers like General Electric send us plans to nuclear power stations, that you're sending us some really sensitive stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, we didn't realize that. We didn't realize that stuff took place. And then they went to our competitors, and our competitors are asking, well, what do you guys do for security? So we made the company making the tender to consider security, and then they went to our competitors and asked, and our competitors went I got this ISO certificate, but don't look right here, please. And we ended up getting a 2.3 million euro tender out of that. So you can leverage security. There are all these possibilities. But there's a lot of these scenarios that people just aren't thinking of because we're like, oh yeah, security is just firefighting, it's just protecting, it's just all this fuddy stuff. But I did a presentation, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, but I don't think risk should be the primary driver of security anymore. I think business should be.
Well, seamless, you see, because I was then going to bring up these comments from Paul, which I knew you'd agree with. Challenges, we convey that in sales in a tech jargon, not a business jargon. And then he goes on to say, here we go. Dissecting the problem in dollars and cents, not zeros and ones. And again, that's back to talking to the business in business language, isn't it? Rather than tech language.
Estella likes the show.
Yeah, I know. Thanks, Estella. We love you too.
We love you, definitely. I think one of the successes I've had is just talking in common sense and business language. Even we didn't, the last company, there's so many things not working, and we basically, every time we found a risk in the organization, we documented the risk, and we would mitigate it. Well, we would propose this is not how it should run, but whatever, you're doing it, we'll mitigate it. And then we did Sanjira, we would actually tag the amount of money that we were spending. So, and all of a sudden now I can go to the CFO. It's like, Well, we had to spend 60,000 quid because John over there didn't think it was worth 3 hours of his time to function that properly. So now we're stuck putting half an FTE on it full time. Or so-and-so didn't do this. And they're like, that one decision that you told me, oh, it's not a big deal, we'll fix it later. Well, it's been 3 years, we still haven't fixed it. We've been spending 300K a year on it. So yeah, that cost $1 million quid. And then, you take that to a CFO, and the last company I worked with, the day the CFO left, he told me, Greg, I wish every department ran budgets the way you did.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have money problems.
So I was trying to read something then. All I saw was baby ugly. I'll come back to that one, Paul. So David Higgs, I'm going to bring up his comment for the simple reason, for those that didn't see the show with David and Jason, I think. Yes. It's been a long week. It's only Monday. It's clear that Rapid7 are taking a slightly different approach when it comes to sales. And back to their comments here, which reaffirms it in what David said. He was in telecoms contact center. Contact center went through the growth over 10 years from business seeing it as money off the bottom line to something that was revenue generating. And security is trying to do that right now. Not all of it, David, maybe Rapid7, but yes, I completely agree.
I think, first, I think we're all flabbergasted by that episode because we were not expecting a vendor to do all the things that we've been saying.
No.
But I think, security vendors obviously make money selling security, but there's a lot of commercial opportunities, both for internal efficiencies. If you run security as a quality function and you actually address all the other business functions from a security perspective, as opposed to doing a bunch of security in the SOC in the basement. Yeah. But there's also, there's selling points. You can make security part of your brand value. Some companies have been breached like 3-4 times in the last 2 years. Now, if you can go 5 years and say, we've never had a breach because we take this seriously, well, you might just win a few points in terms of market share off of that.
Just devil's advocate here. How many businesses do you know who've been through a breach that people have stopped trusting and stopped using?
Relatively few.
Yeah, it's a worry, really, isn't it?
But I think once you have, I don't think one breach is that big a deal. I think people will forgive one breach. I think once you're having like successive 3 or 4 breaches, if people have options, they might start exercising those options.
Yeah, completely.
And that's the trend that we're seeing. It's just upwards. T-Mobile's been hit 3 times? Is it T-Mobile been hit like 3 times in the last 2 years?
Yeah. It's not a great trend, is it?
No, it's not good.
Not really. Although I see Capita are recruiting for information security executive at the moment, if anyone's interested.
Information security manager.
Oh, sorry. Was that what it was?
Yeah. Well, if you saw my comment on that, I've had that.
I didn't know. I didn't.
Oh, okay. No, I had that job, that title, when I was in charge of the BBC account.
Oh.
Capita BBC TVL. And I was finding a lot of issues. Like, they basically told me the BBC was they told me the job was a customer management job because the BBC was a very difficult customer. But basically, like, what we sold the BBC was not what we were providing to the BBC. Capita had outsourced most things to IBM, but the contracts with IBM were totally different to the contracts with the BBC. And I just set off like fixing things and reading through contracts and realizing most of these services are excluded due to these little clauses here or there that you hadn't considered. And after 3 months, the BBC, earlier on, the BBC had told me to actually slow down because they were worried I was going to get fired because I was finding too many problems. And after 3 months, the BBC said, we're going to have a meeting with your boss and we're going to make sure we're going to make you report directly to the managing director because we think you're of strategic importance to the account. And I was like, what about the worry that I would get fired? And the director at the BBC, his exact words verbatim, quote, "They couldn't possibly be that fucking stupid."
They could.
I was sacked 2 days later.
You see, this is another problem, isn't it? With businesses trying to hide away from the problems that they've got. Yeah. Unfortunately. Let's get some of these questions up because we've got some good ones in here. Let me scrolling back up. Edo, great to see you. Exciting news, actually. I've got some news to announce tomorrow on LinkedIn. I'm going to be working with Edo and the team at CISO Terrier at Info Security Europe this year. Going to be standing on their stand and rugby tackling people as they come in the door. So if you see me, try not to run. I'm going to grab you. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm not a technical expert, but the feedback I've had from every leader who I've put in touch with Edo has been phenomenal. So I'm going to do my little bit there to see what I can do to help. So as always, great discussion. Happy to hear how you sell to people that don't realize they have a problem. They think that all is great and have no idea that there might be a better solution. I think you just need me on your stand at Info Security Europe, Edo.
Yeah, I second that. I mean, I've had a demo from Edo from CISO, and I've mentioned this before on the show. Like it's such a cool concept. It's not, you know, AI, machine learning, blah, blah, blah. It's genuinely like improve the quality of your IT and business and security processes, which is how poor quality of those is how breaches happen. Yeah, but a bit of a tangent. But no, I think there's value there, and I think communicating it simply is very important. I'm always flabbergasted at, you know, you just kind of translate, think of security again, you know, fix the business processes rather than firefighting security all the time. And the number of executives that I talk to is like, well, that's the first time security's ever made sense to me. Like, I think the people within the industry don't realize just how alienating we are.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hubris as well. It's like, oh, you know, it's quite elitist. But if you take a step back, it's like, this is not a good way of solving this problem, you know, from 35,000 feet. It's like, we should not just be firefighting and detecting and responding all the time. We should be asking ourselves why we're producing this stuff. And I think, you know, that's the part of my work that I enjoy, is creating those narratives and those value propositions around tools that even the inventors of the tools never thought that they could use them for that.
I think that's the beauty of what these people are getting from working with you as well, Greg, without a doubt.
Yeah, that's the idea. And also it shows, like, you know, like Hitachi's asked me to write this blog series. They gave me almost no direction. And because I've been talking to some of their salespeople, and they're trying, because people see storage and recovery, which is Hitachi Vantara, they see it as an operational IT things. And one of their salespeople today was like, we had an event and we had 14 heads of security, and not one of them could tell us what the recovery times were.
Wow.
Because security doesn't see recovery and storage as a security thing. They're like, oh, that's IT operations, leave it to them. It's like, pretty important, actually.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not the cool whiz-bang toy that you get to play with every day. So we ignore it. I think that shows a lack of, I don't know, caring about the business or whatever.
100%. We need to talk about ugly babies now.
Yeah. So anyway, but the work I'm doing for them is they gave me like zero direction in this blog series, and I'm basically trying to make storage relevant to security people with some fairly radical ideas. Like, if you have recovery, you have a maximum impact for if something goes wrong. So don't worry about risk management, because there's a maximum impact and you know what it is, and move that resource somewhere else. And you explain that to anyone outside security. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You're reallocating resource to where it's more needed, where it's going to do more strategic, long-term, sustainable good. Yeah. In security, no, risk management, no.
So the question is from Paul, what are some ways you call out the problem without calling their baby ugly?
Call it interesting.
What an interesting looking baby you have there. That's worse. It's nothing worse than an ugly baby, is there? Sorry, you don't know what to do. It's a great question, Paul, actually.
I feel like that's where I've actually had some luck with my approach, because I'm proposing something new, right? It's not like you've not failed at doing this before. I'm proposing you do something entirely different with the solution, or a different approach. Yeah, it's tricky. Well, how do you, because you're talking about, like, you need to, you know, what, you go in, your security is crap, buy my tool so you can fix it.
I mean, again, using the ugly baby analogy, I mean, the first thing to assess and to work out is whether they think their baby's ugly or not, because if they don't, there's no problem to fix, is there?
Yeah, they might just not care.
They might not care how ugly that baby is. And again, you know, a mother and father's love can be quite blinding. I've got 6 children. I'm lucky they're all beautiful, but every parent says that, right? I think for me, it's...
Which is impressive, considering they share half your DNA.
I know. It's such a tosser.
I've had this discussion a few times with various like multinationals this week. Like, Americans do not understand how people in the UK just take the piss out of each other.
Yeah, it's something we're brought up with, really. I think, Paul, it's back to not just building rapport and building a relationship, but digging down and understanding not just what their problems are, but what, as Steve said last week, actually, what is it that's driving them mad when they're driving home from work?
Yeah.
What is it they're spending their time thinking about and worrying about when they're at home with their family? And they should be spending time with their family, because that's the problem that you need to uncover. And then if you've got a solution for that, great. If not, you've built up an awful amount of trust and positivity with that client. You've got something to say, Greg, I think.
I feel like it's the Paul Robinson episode.
Oh, it is. Paul's back. The example is, I have 4 kids. Imagine someone calling up and saying, "Hey, you're a crappy father. I can help you." Yeah, I get that all the time. I've got 6.
Social services.
I don't think there is. There is an easy way around that awkward conversation. Apart from, you can have that awkward conversation when that person trusts you and you've built up a relationship.
No, but I think I would, instead of saying that, I would say, like, do you want the best for your children? And then
have this bag
and take. I was gonna say, actually, but take them down that direction. And once you've made a few steps, like, maybe some plastic surgery is also in order. Just kind of slip that in.
Oh, Paul, don't apologize for hijacking. This is what it's all about. We want these comments and we want this stimulation. So please carry on.
But I think we have veered off what was supposed to be the primary topic significantly. But
we have, which was events. I suppose the short answer is, if you're in Manchester on Thursday and you want to know how to run a successful event, come and see Greg and I and Steve Armstrong from Apex or IQ at the CISO experience on Thursday evening.
I think we all know the secret. Open bar.
There is that.
Yeah.
But cunning plan. You've got a set amount of budget. Rather than get 50 people along where they're going to get 2 drinks each, go for 25 quality people where there's an open bar. And what that does is gives you amazing feedback after the event, because people had a wonderful time.
You've actually tangented onto something by accident there.
Oh, always. Yeah.
I've hosted dinner events that were very successful. 25 people attending. A lot of people kind of talking, splitting off into groups, presentations happening, full room, a lot of chatter, blah blah blah. And I've had some that bombed. 2/3 of the people didn't show up. You're supposed to have 10 different potential clients show up, and 2 or 3 showed up.
Yeah,
they're the ones that get sales.
Yeah,
it's the ones with the low number of people in the room, where it's intimate enough.
And why is that?
It's the same phenomenon. If you go out to dinner with 12 friends, you don't get 12 people all having one conversation.
I haven't got 12 friends.
Sort you out. But you end up in these, like, 3 or 4 people here talking, 3 or 4 people there talking, 3 or 4 people there talking.
Yes.
People just kind of separate into groups, and then they're not even talking to you, the host, anymore. And I find, like, a low number, like 6 or 7 people at a dinner event, you get really nice results. So that's quite an interesting one as well. I think people go really, really big, and they don't realize that you lose that connection, or you can lose that connection.
Yeah.
But I also, the big one from my last event is just review not the last event, a couple months ago now, but the way we talk, like involving the audience is really quite important. Like, I find, like, fireside chats, panels, people are way more receptive than when you talk at them.
Yeah. It's having the involvement from people, isn't it? So they get to, I mean, the most successful, I've only done a few events now, but the most successful one by a mile was in Tampa. And we had Steve Hindle had agreed to host the panel, as Greg is, on Thursday. But we had in our minds that it was going to be Steve and a couple of others at the top talking. But what actually happened when we looked at the names and the job roles of the people that we had in, and I think 6 of them were due to speak, had a speaking slot at B-Sides like 2 days later, we decided to mix it up, and we had an open mic event So we had 3-4 microphones, muggins here, running around the room, putting it in people's faces. And that went on for, I think, 3 hours. It was meant to go on for an hour.
Yeah.
And the feedback from that event is just unbelievable. People got real value from it. Sponsors got value from it. They managed to build relationships. But also two of the guests emailed afterwards saying how those conversations had helped them develop their business, one of them, and another one had built up a business connection that they were signing up a deal the next week. And these are attendees, not the sponsors, which, again, it's important that people who are attending are getting value, not just the sponsors. You've got to think about that. And that goes to Joe W's question on how would you research your target audience. I mean, most vendors, suppliers will have a sweet spot, whether it's 1,000 to 10,000 employees and geographical locations. And again, when we're looking to see who to invite, our events are invitation only. We look for people who it's likely that the problem our sponsor is solving might have. So that's the way we look around. For example, Edo talked about CISO Terra. We're hosting a dinner in London on the 20th of June. And where CISO Terra can really, really help people is when they're in the early stages of their CISO role. Yep. So we've targeted people who are in the early stages of that CISO role. So again, it's understanding who your target market is. If you want to know how we do that, from my side, we use Sales Navigator on LinkedIn. And rather than have a third-party company mailing out saying, would you like to come to this event? The invitations are personal and they come from me, admittedly sent from a third-party marketing company on my behalf. But then when people reply, I then pick that up and engage them in conversation. And I think that's why it's worked. I hope that answers your question, Joe. It was a bit of a rambling narrative.
Just go back to Paul's calling the baby ugly bit. And people have figured this out already, but I think one of the ideal times to reach out is when there is a new CISO or a new CIO. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure people have already figured this out, because if I change my job status to CISO of some new company tomorrow, I will get 50 vendor messages within an hour. But if someone's just started, none of the baggage is theirs, so they can do whatever they want.
I agree. David's comment, so more intimate events produce high quality leads. I guess the challenge is to seeing how to scale that to a pitch on the stand. I mean, for me, I hate the whole approach at RSA anyway, which is the numbers game approach. Scan, 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 and then have a team of people trawling through afterwards. I understand it works, but from someone who's spent 30 years in sales, it seems the wrong way around to me. So for me, if I was working on a stand, I'll be trying to qualify people at that point that the problem they have can be solved by whatever it is we're talking about, and then invite them to a more intimate event afterwards. Yeah. Which, if you're interested, just call.
Because they advertise like, hey, we're at RSA. Come check us out. Stand 24. And you go to stand and it's like, scan the badge. Boop. Here's a squishy toy. Bye.
Yeah.
Like I learned nothing about your product here.
No.
You haven't qualified me. We didn't have a conversation. I didn't get to know you. Nothing happened.
So I suppose they've got a warm list, haven't they, of people to call. Again, these multi-billion-dollar companies must know what they're doing, because it must work. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep doing it, right?
I think, now here's an interesting one. I'm not sure. It works, but does it work well? And a lot of the companies in security are young companies. Yeah. They're startups of some degree. There's, compared to any other industry, there's a bizarre number of companies with $1 billion+ valuations.
Yeah.
Some that have been around for 5, 6, 7, 8 years that have never made a profit.
Yeah.
Never made a profit. They live off VC investment, and a lot of the marketing is oriented not at the customer, but at
the VCs. Yeah. Keep them happy.
Look how impressive we are. Look how many buzzwords we use. We've got AI. 4 people in a basement in Malaysia.
Yeah. It is.
Not that I've seen that in person.
Yeah, you so have. And I mean, I worked in the finance space for over 20 years. And yeah, I mean, I've got my own opinions on that. I think there's a lot of company valuations. We've seen company valuations shrink massively over the last 12 months. And I think we're going to see that even more over the coming 12 months. And these massive companies that have never turned a profit, VCs are already being a lot more shrewd when it comes to who they're investing in at the moment, much to the chagrin of many, many vendors out there I've spoken to who've lost funding recently, by the way. Paul's made another good point.
Yes, he did.
Hasn't he?
Yes.
Because you must be a mind reader, Paul, because the latter part of this year, my plan is to focus events at exactly those people. Because let's not forget, a CISO is a leader. A CISO reports to the board. But does the CISO write the check? 9 times out of 10, Greg, I'd say no. Would you?
I think a CISO operating as a CISO, as a C-level, and actually reporting to the board does. But I think it's a very small, to your point that I know you're trying to make, it's a very small minority of CISO roles that are actually that.
Yes.
I think you hear a lot of CISOs complain that they're drowning in work, that they're under-resourced, or this or that. It's like a C-level individual's job is to influence the business.
Yeah.
If you are not in a position to influence the business anyway, and you're literally just shoving shit all day, metaphorical shit, literally metaphorical, then I would argue you're not a CISO. And we've mentioned this on the show before. I've spoken to people who, they have mid-level InfoSec managers in the organization who insist on being called CISOs, or they're going to leave if they don't get the title. It's like, well, you are not a C-level executive. This is ridiculous. So yeah, you do have a lot of those less senior CISOs that don't have that decision-making authority, and you need to take that somewhere else. You need to take your business somewhere else. And I think the arguments and the marketing that we're using, or that many people are using in cyber now, are just not fit for purpose for that audience. They're not even quite, even like a head of InfoSec who might have, some budget, some authority, whatever. Most of the websites that you see out there are still very hypey, very gimmicky.
Can I be ageist now then and say maybe this is something to do with the age of the founders, of the people who are setting up the companies, compared to the actual age of people who are sitting on the board? Because, and there are exceptions to this, and I don't want to cause offense to anyone, but these people are more likely to be in their 40s, 50s, and perhaps 60s, and perhaps not be quite as enamored with the hoodie image on the website, with the kind of matrix effect going down. So again, it's like they're messing my hair up now. It's like they're appeasing themselves. But the question that Paul's asking is why companies aren't focusing on CFOs, CEOs, and COOs.
I totally agree. I think age is a potential. I think it's basically a more mature, more commercially minded audience, and the age is going to be a factor in that. So it's a bit of both. You could have someone younger who's just very kind of business minded and not impressed by, ooh, look, neon stuff.
Yeah,
like on the air sign.
Like me. Yeah.
It's all purple.
I've just argued I'm 50 next year. I've just completely argued my point, haven't I?
Yeah, exactly. Just keeping yourself young.
Thanks. Yeah.
But I think if you do want to sell to that kind of financial director, CFO, COO, CEO audience, you need totally different value propositions. You need totally different narratives to what we're doing. Like, you go to the website of most vendors, like, I do not understand what it is. Okay, it's an EDR. What's an EDR? Why? Well, why does it cost this much? What does it give me?
Yeah.
You've not packaged that in a way.
It's back to the point earlier about technology terminology rather than dollars and cents business.
Yeah, you've not packaged. And you know what? Like, a CEO is used to getting a super abridged version. So you don't have to say like, oh, it's complicated. It's this, that. It's like, no. It's like, just go from like as high level as you can, like elevator pitch, 30 seconds from a business context. That's the way you need to sell it. But I think like most, again, like, we're not even selling security solutions with a business narrative in mind. We think we live in this cool little tech silo, and we think everything in it is really cool and awesome, and other people really don't give a toss. And then we're like, they don't take us seriously. It's like, well, because objectively, you're kind of like an anthill, and no one really gives a crap.
Well, do you know we're out of time? Can you believe that?
The other one I see is just people, like the amount of security people, practitioners you see complaining about management and not having traction and budget and this and that. And I posted about this, or somebody posted and I commented about this. Like, I have this all the time. It's like, if you're in that situation where you don't have the control, you don't have the influence, that should be the very first issue that you try to address, because you can't actually accomplish anything else. But very few people are doing that.
Why is that? Because people are hesitant to change. People don't want to rock the boat. What is
I
it?
think people are hesitant to change. People might not know how to communicate. The communication skills are not exactly very high up there. Again, I had a call today, and they were really struggling to find someone who had kind of a CISO background, but also understood business and was not an introvert. Someone actually go out and talk to the board, talk to media, that kind of stuff. It's really, really hard to find in security and IT. It does go by really fast, doesn't it, Istra?
Oh, yeah.
So those are challenges that we need to overcome, and it's the same in the sales. You need to make the same changes that a CISO does to get influence within his own organization. As a salesperson, you have to do that, but you also have to educate. You have to, if you're going to go and sell something to a CEO, is it something the CEO is going to use, or is it something the CISO is going to use? Well, you have to sell the CEO, but you have to educate the CISO at the same time. So once the CEO buys it, he's going to use it. I've just flipped places. What's going on?
I know I moved you because I'm now going to wrap things up, and I want to bring up a comment that Joe's just dropped in just before I do, and it will cut off half your face, and I didn't want to do that to you, Greg. Joe sees selling as helping people. If you want to do a good job, you should be able to explain your product to everyone at all levels of understanding. And I think that is this show in a nutshell, really, isn't it? Having that ability to communicate to all levels of people, having that ability to engage with all levels of people and actually get them to engage with you and find what you're talking about interesting, which goes back to the duct tape at the start, doesn't it?
That's on you.
I'm sure you said duct tape, did you not?
You brought it up saying I'd said it, and I was like, what?
Or was it the jumpsuit? Did you not mention jumpsuit, orange jumpsuit, no duct tape? No.
Just a t-shirt. I don't know.
It's been a long day. That's what it is. Well, look, everyone, thanks for listening to me ramble on and the insights from Greg today. It's been a lot of fun as always. If anyone's interested in physically coming on the show, sponsoring the show, being a little bit more involved, please reach out to us. We're keen to expand it. We are in discussions with a firm at the moment about some potential sponsorship, but I know that other vendors out there may find it useful. I know Rapid7 found it useful when they came on. So if you are interested in being a guest or having us or talking about your processes that you do something differently as a vendor, please do reach out. Greg, any wise words from you before I press the video button?
Wise? No.
Any words from you?
No, I think, we bounce all over the place, but I think, put thought in everything you do. Put thought in the psychology, put thought in the context of, the person you're selling to, the person you're addressing to in the audience, the person internally you're trying to make a business case to grow your security department, whatever. Put yourself in their shoes, learn their day-to-day, learn their concerns, learn their lingo, learn what occupies them. Then sell according to those things. Don't sell according to what you think as a security person is important.
Do you think, I know I said I was going to wrap it up. Do you think there's a bit of an education piece missing for the new salespeople in the industry then? Because it is so data-driven, and rightly so. Sales is a data-driven business.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot more that could be added to the training.
We've discussed this. We need to put this together. Yeah. And I think it's good sales leadership as well. Because I think good people, good leaders understand what people need to do. They understand it can't always be done in one financial quarter. They understand that metrics can be misleading. They understand that culture is really important and you can't measure that. And just run with it. We didn't hit the numbers this month. That's okay. We expect that. It's a long-term process. Coach our people. Just be altruistic. Do the best you can.
Well, how about not believe the hype that you tell your VC when you're taking their money at the start?
Yeah, that helps also. But I think just good leadership in sales is also important.
Yeah, very much so. Greg, thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you again in person on Thursday. And for everyone else, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for the questions. It's been awesome as ever. See you all very, very soon. Take care.